I was 12, maybe 13 when it happened. The kind of age where you think you know everything, where you feel invincible behind a screen. My parents had gone out that night, some dinner thing with friends, I think, and they wouldn't be back until late. I remember them telling me to lock the doors, get to bed at a reasonable time, the usual parent stuff. I nodded, said sure, and the second their car pulled out of the driveway, I knew I'd be up way past midnight. Our computer was set up in what used to be a dining room. My dad had put the desk right in front of this massive window that looked out onto our backyard. During the day it was nice. You could see the trees, the fence, our neighbor's trampoline. But at night that window turned into this black void. You couldn't see anything out there, just your own reflection staring back at you in the glass. I had MSN Messenger pulled up like always. My friends list was huge, maybe 100 people, and I'd say at least half of them were people I'd never actually met in real life. Kids from other countries, people who played the same online games as me, friends of friends who just sort of accumulated over time. My parents had done the whole lecture about stranger danger on the internet, and I'd roll my eyes and say I knew I wasn't stupid. But honestly, I talked to strangers all the time. Everyone did. That night I was bouncing between conversations, the way you do when you're bored and restless. I had a bag of chips next to me, one of those big family-size ones, and I was working my way through it while switching between chat windows. I was drinking this weird energy drink I'd found in the back of the fridge, something my older cousin had left behind. I felt so mature staying up late by myself, eating junk food, talking to whoever I wanted. Around 1 in the morning, I was in the middle of a conversation with this guy I'd been chatting with for maybe 6 months. He told me he lived in the UK, I was in Canada, and we'd talk about music, video games, normal stuff. He was a few years older than me, maybe 16 or 17, but that didn't seem weird at the time. Lots of my online friends were older. Then he sent a message that made me stop mid-bite. "You should probably slow down on those chips. You've eaten like half the bag already, Lowell." I stared at the screen. My stomach did this weird little flip. I looked at the chip bag, then back at the chat window. I definitely hadn't mentioned what I was eating. I scrolled up through our conversation. Nothing. We'd been talking about some band, then about a game update. No mention of food at all, I typed back, trying to keep it casual. "How do you know I'm eating chips?" The response came fast. "Too fast. Come on, I can see you. You've been at it for like 20 minutes. Also, that energy drink is probably making you jittery by now. You keep bouncing your leg." My hands froze on the keyboard. He was right. I'd been bouncing my leg. It's this nervous habit I've always had. I stopped immediately and looked around my empty house. The silence suddenly felt heavy. "Wrong. Seriously, how do you know that?" I typed, my fingers shaky now. "You got up like 30 minutes ago to grab more food from the kitchen. Took you maybe 3 minutes. You're wearing that blue hoodie with the white drawstrings." I looked down at my hoodie, blue, white drawstrings. Exactly what he said. My heart started hammering so hard I could hear it in my ears. The window. That huge black window right in front of me. He had to be outside. He had to have found my address somehow. Traveled all the way from the UK and was standing in my backyard right now, watching me through the glass. I didn't even think. So I jumped up so fast my chair rolled backward and slammed into the wall. I ran to every window on the ground floor and yanked the curtains shut, my hands trembling so bad I could barely grip the fabric. I locked the front door, the back door, checked them twice. My phone was upstairs and I ran to get it, taking the steps 2 at a time. When I got back to the computer, there were more messages waiting. "Why'd you close the curtains?" "I was enjoying the show. Don't freak out. It's not what you think. Check your webcam. My webcam. The small black camera that sat on top of my monitor. The one I used maybe once a month to video chat with my real-life friends. The one I always left plugged in because unplugging it and putting it away felt like too much effort. My parents had told me to unplug it when I wasn't using it. I never listened. I looked at it now. The tiny glass lens stared back at me like a dead eye. My hands were shaking as I typed. "What did you do?" "Relax, I've just been checking in on you sometimes. It's not a big deal." "You're being dramatic." I felt sick. Actually, physically sick. Like I might throw up right there on the keyboard. He'd been watching me. "Not tonight," he said sometimes. How long had this been going on? Days, weeks, months? I thought about all the times I'd sat at this computer, getting changed near the desk, because my room was messy and I couldn't find clothes. Sitting in my pajamas, half asleep, talking to friends, picking at my face in the monitor's reflection, crying when I'd had a bad day. All these private, stupid, vulnerable moments. And someone had been on the other side of that camera, watching. I yanked the webcam off the monitor so hard, the USB port made a cracking sound. I threw it across the room and heard it hit the wall. Then I just sat there, staring at the empty space where it had been, trying to breathe normally. He sent one more message before I blocked him. "You shouldn't have done that." I was the nice one. There are others who aren't. I didn't tell my parents when they got home an hour later. I don't know why. Maybe I was embarrassed. Maybe I felt stupid for talking to strangers, like they'd always warned me not to. Maybe I just wanted to pretend it never happened. But it did happen. That was 10 years ago. I'm an adult now, I live in a different house, I have a completely different computer. But every single camera on every device I own, laptop, phone, tablet, even the Ring doorbell I installed last year, is covered in thick black duct tape. People make fun of me for it sometimes. They say I'm paranoid, that I'm being ridiculous. They don't know what it feels like to realize someone was watching you when you thought you were alone. They don't know how that violation burrows into your brain and stays there, whispering that you're never really safe, that someone could always be on the other side of the screen. I still think about that night sometimes, about that horrible sinking feeling when I realized what was happening. About his last message, there are others who aren't. I never found out what he meant by that, and honestly, I don't want to know. Moving into my first apartment felt like this huge milestone. I was 22, finally out on my own, splitting rent with my boyfriend who worked night shifts at a warehouse. The place wasn't anything special, a small 2-bedroom in an older building with thin walls and carpet that had seen better days, but it was ours. We'd only been there about a week when it happened. It was a Tuesday night, I remember, because I'd just finished unpacking the last of the kitchen boxes and was feeling pretty proud of myself. The apartment was finally starting to look like an actual home instead of a storage unit. I had the TV on in the background, some cooking show I wasn't really watching, and I was sitting on our second-hand couch scrolling through my phone. Around 8:30, I heard the doorknob rattle. Not a knock, a rattle. Like someone was inserting a key and trying to turn it. My first thought was pure excitement. My boyfriend must have gotten off early. Maybe they hadn't needed him for the full shift, or maybe he'd traded with someone. It happens sometimes. I smiled, already getting up to unlock the deadbolt for him because I'd locked it out of habit after he left for work. But then I stopped mid-step. Something felt off. I glanced at the microwave clock. 8:33 p.m. He wasn't supposed to be home until 10:30 at the earliest. His shift didn't even end until 10. The doorknob kept turning, jiggling harder now. Then came a knock. Not a friendly, "Hey, it's me," knock. This was insistent, demanding. I stood frozen in the middle of the living room, my phone still in my hand, watching the doorknob twist back and forth. The deadbolt was engaged, thank God, but I could see the entire handle moving like someone was really working at it from the other side. My heart started beating faster. I tiptoed to the kitchen. Our apartment had this tiny galley kitchen with a window that looked out over the parking lot. I carefully pulled back the edge of the curtain and peered out. No cars I recognized. My boyfriend's beat-up Honda wasn't there. Neither was my best friend's SUV or anyone else's vehicle I knew. Just the usual scattered cars of other tenants, sitting there under the yellow parking lot lights. That's when panic set in for real. The doorknob rattling stopped for a moment, and I thought maybe whoever it was had given up. My hands were shaking as I stood there in the kitchen, trying to decide what to do. Call my boyfriend, call the landlord. I didn't even have the landlord's number programmed in my phone yet. Then I heard a new sound, a scraping, metal on metal. I crept back toward the door and heard it clearly. Something thin and metal was being wedged into the gap between the door and the frame. They were trying to jimmy it open. I could hear them working at it. That awful scraping sound, the door flexing slightly in its frame. My whole body went cold. This wasn't someone who had the wrong apartment. This wasn't a confused neighbor. Someone was actively trying to break into my home while I was inside it. I didn't even think. I grabbed the biggest knife from the kitchen, this chef's knife we'd gotten at Target, and I ran to the bathroom. It was the only room in the apartment with a lock on the door besides the bedroom, and the bathroom felt safer somehow, smaller, easier to defend. I locked myself in, sat down on the closed toilet lid with the knife in one hand, and dialed 911 with the other. My voice was shaking so bad when the dispatcher answered. I remember trying to whisper, like whoever was outside might somehow hear me through the bathroom door and the front door and know I was calling for help. I told her someone was trying to break in, that they were prying at the door right now, that I was alone and terrified. She was calm, professional. She told me officers were on the way, that I should stay where I was, stay quiet, stay on the line with her. I could still hear the scraping from the living room. It felt like it went on forever, but she told me later it was about 3 minutes. 3 minutes of sitting on that toilet with a knife in my hand, listening to someone try to force their way into my home. Then it stopped. Just silence. No more rattling, no more scraping. Nothing. The dispatcher told me to stay put, that officers were almost there. I sat in that bathroom for another 10 minutes, barely breathing, until I heard the heavy knock and, "Police, ma'am, you called 911?" I've never been so relieved to hear anything in my entire life. When I finally unlocked the bathroom, and then the front door, there were 2 officers standing there. They asked me questions. What happened? What did I hear? Did I see anyone? I told them everything, my words tumbling out too fast. One of them walked around the outside of the building, while the other stayed with me. About 20 minutes later, they found him, an elderly man, probably in his 70s, wandering around the parking lot of the next building over. He had a knife on him and a crowbar. The officers brought him back, not close to my apartment, but I could see him from my kitchen window. He looked confused, agitated. He kept pointing at my building, at my unit specifically, saying something to the officers I couldn't hear. One of the officers came back to explain. The man used to live in my apartment. Years ago, apparently. He'd been evicted or moved out. They weren't entirely clear on the details, but he had some kind of dementia or serious mental health issues. He was convinced we had stolen his belongings when we moved in. He wanted his stuff back. In his mind, we were the intruders, not him. The officer told me they were taking him in for a psychiatric evaluation, that I'd been right to call, that if I'd opened that door, he couldn't say what would have happened. My boyfriend came home early that night. I'd called him right after the police arrived, and he'd left work immediately. He felt awful, guilty, even though it wasn't his fault. We pushed our heavy dresser in front of the door that night, and neither of us really slept. The landlord changed our locks the next day. Added a chain lock, too. He apologized over and over, said he had no idea the previous tenant had been experiencing something like that he should have warned us. But the thing is, you don't expect something like that. You don't think about who lived in your apartment before you, whether they might come back, whether they might be dangerous. We only stayed there another 2 months before we broke the lease and moved. I couldn't feel safe there anymore. Every time I heard footsteps in the hallway, every time someone walked past our door, I'd freeze. I'd wait to see if they'd stop, if the doorknob would start to turn. Even now, 5 years later, living in a completely different city in a completely different apartment, my heart stops when someone knocks on my door. That split second before I look through the peephole feels like drowning. My hands still shake sometimes when I turn a deadbolt. People don't realize how much something like that stays with you. How it changes the way you move through the world. How you're never quite as comfortable in your own home as you used to be. I think about that night a lot. About what would have happened if I'd opened the door when I first heard the key turning. If I'd assumed it was my boyfriend and unlocked the deadbolt with a smile on my face. I think about the knife he had on him, the crowbar, the confused anger in his eyes when the police found him, and I'm grateful. So grateful that I trusted my instincts, that I looked out the window, that I didn't open that door, because I really don't know if I'd be here to tell this story if I had. I've lived in the same house for about 7 years now. It's in a quiet cul-de-sac. One of those neighborhoods where everyone knows everyone, where kids ride bikes in the street during summer and people actually wave when they drive past. My bedroom is on the second floor, right at the front of the house with 2 windows that give me a perfect view of the entire cul-de-sac below. This happened last winter. We'd been getting weather warnings all day about a major snowstorm coming in overnight, the kind of storm where they tell you to stock up on groceries and stay off the roads. I remember going to bed around 11, looking out my window at the first flakes just starting to fall, fat and slow in the streetlight. I'm a light sleeper, always have been. So when I woke up around 3 in the morning needing to use the bathroom, it wasn't unusual. I lay there for a second in the dark, that groggy middle of the night, feeling where you're debating whether you can hold it until morning or if you really need to get up. I got up. My room was dark except for the ambient light from outside, that weird purplish glow you get when there's snow on the ground, reflecting the street lights. I walked past my windows and something made me stop. The snow. I remembered the warnings about the storm, and I was curious how much we'd actually gotten. I looked out. The cul-de-sac was completely transformed. The snow was deep, higher than the curb, easily 8 or 9 inches at least. It covered everything like someone had laid down a fresh white blanket. The cars parked along the street were just rounded shapes now. Every driveway, every lawn, every surface was uniform and untouched, pristine. Not a single footprint, not a tire track, nothing. Just smooth, unmarked snow glowing under the streetlights. It was actually kind of beautiful in that eerie way, a completely silent, snow-covered street is beautiful at 3 in the morning. I stood there for maybe 10 seconds, then headed downstairs. My house has this open layout where you can see the living room from the stairs, and everything was dark and quiet. I flipped on the hallway light, that bright, jarring kind of light that makes you squint when you've been in the dark. Used the bathroom, then went to the kitchen to get some water because my mouth was dry. The kitchen was cold. I remember that specifically. We always turned the heat down at night to save money, and the tile floor was like ice on my bare feet. I filled up a glass from the tap, drank it standing there by the sink, then filled it again to take back upstairs with me. The whole thing, bathroom, water, standing in the kitchen, probably took 4 minutes. Maybe 5 at most. I turned off the hallway light, walked back upstairs in the dark, and padded back to my bedroom. I set the water glass on my nightstand and was about to climb back into bed when I glanced at the window again. I don't know why. Maybe just to see the snow one more time before I went back to sleep. Maybe some subconscious part of my brain was still appreciating how peaceful it looked. I looked out the window. My stomach dropped. There were footprints in the snow. Fresh footprints, leading from my house, cutting directly across the cul-de-sac and disappearing behind my neighbor's house across the way. I stood there frozen, my brain trying to process what I was seeing. These weren't old footprints that had been there before, and I just didn't notice. The snow was deep enough that footprints would be obvious, and I had specifically looked at that exact spot 4 minutes ago. The snow had been completely smooth, completely untouched. Now there was a clear trail, deep impressions, the kind you make when you're walking through almost a foot of fresh snow. I could see where each step had compressed the snow down, dark pockets in the white surface. The trail started right at the edge of my front yard, not from the street, not from another house, but from my property, and led in a straight line across to the Hendersons' place. My hands started shaking. I pressed my face closer to the cold window glass, trying to see more details. The footprints were single file, purposeful. Not the wandering path of someone drunk or confused. Someone had walked directly from my house to the Hendersons' house and gone around the back where I couldn't see anymore. I checked my clock. 3:07 a.m. I'd gone downstairs at maybe 3:02, 4, maybe 5 minutes total. That's all. Someone had been outside my house in those 4 minutes, in the middle of a snowstorm at 3 in the morning, and left a trail directly from my property. My mind started racing. Had someone been watching my house, waiting for me to turn on a light so they'd know someone was awake and moving around? Or worse, had they been trying to get in, and when I turned on that hallway light, they ran? I thought about how I'd been downstairs in the bright kitchen, completely visible through the windows if someone was outside. I thought about how I'd stood there drinking water, totally unaware, while someone was potentially right outside in the dark. The Hendersons were an older couple, probably in their 70s. Their house was dark. Everyone's house was dark. It was 3 in the morning in the middle of a snowstorm. No one should have been outside. I stood at that window for a long time. I don't even know how long. Maybe 20 minutes. Just watching, waiting to see if anyone would come back, if there would be more footprints, if I'd see movement. But there was nothing. Just that single trail of footprints cutting across pristine snow, and the empty, silent street. I didn't call the police. I know I probably should have, but I didn't. I kept thinking about how it would sound. Yes, there are footprints in the snow near my house. They'd ask if I saw a person. No, if anything was taken or damaged. No, if I felt in immediate danger. No? What would they even do? Drive around looking for footprints. I didn't sleep the rest of that night. I sat in my bed with my back against the headboard, watching that window, watching those footprints. As the sky started to lighten around 6 a.m., I could see them even more clearly. They definitely started from my yard. There was no question about it. Around 7, I saw Mr. Henderson come out his front door in a bathrobe to get his newspaper. He walked right past where those footprints disappeared behind his house, didn't even glance over. Either he didn't notice them or didn't think they were strange. By mid-morning, the snow started falling again, lighter this time, but enough to start filling in the footprints. By early afternoon, they were mostly gone. Just slight depressions in the snow that you wouldn't notice unless you knew exactly where to look. I asked the Hendersons about it a few days later, tried to be casual about it. "Hey, did you notice any footprints in your yard after that big storm?" Mrs. Henderson looked at me like I was speaking another language. "Footprints? No, honey. We didn't even go outside that day. I've thought about it a lot since then. Who was outside my house at 3 in the morning in the middle of a snowstorm? What were they doing? Were they trying to break in and I scared them off when I turned on the light? Were they watching me through the kitchen window? Why did they go to the Hendersons' house? The worst part is the timing. 4 minutes. That's all I was downstairs. When I first looked out that window, there was nothing. When I looked again, there was proof that someone had been right there, right outside, while I was downstairs alone with all the lights on. I still look out that window every night before bed now, especially when it snows. I tell myself I'm just checking the weather, but that's not really true. I'm checking for footprints, for any sign that someone is outside watching, waiting. So far, the snow has always been empty, but I can't shake the feeling that one night it won't be. I was in 6th grade when this happened. 11 years old, maybe 12. Still young enough that babysitting felt like this huge responsibility, like I was being trusted with something really important and adult. There was this woman who'd just moved into our neighborhood a few weeks earlier. She was a single mom from somewhere on the East Coast, Massachusetts, I think, and she'd relocated to Indianapolis for work or to get away from something, I was never totally clear on which. She had this little boy, maybe 2 years old, with these big dark eyes and chubby cheeks. He was cute in that toddler way where they're still more baby than kid. My mom had met her at the neighborhood pool and they'd gotten to talking. When the woman mentioned she needed a babysitter for a few hours one evening, my mom volunteered me. I didn't mind. It seemed like easy money. The kid would probably sleep the whole time, and all I had to do was exist in the house and make sure nothing caught fire. The night she needed me was a Friday. She told me she had a date, her first one since moving to Indianapolis, and she seemed nervous about it in a way that made me feel bad for her. Like she was trying really hard to start fresh and be normal again. She showed me around the house, where the snacks were, where the first aid kit was, all the emergency numbers on the fridge. The baby was already asleep in his crib upstairs, and she told me he usually slept through the night, so I probably wouldn't even hear from him. After she left, the house felt really quiet. Not scary quiet, just empty quiet. I set myself up at the kitchen table with my math homework spread out in front of me. Pre-algebra. I was failing it. Like genuinely, seriously failing it. And I had this massive worksheet due Monday that I'd been avoiding all week. I figured I might as well use the time to actually get it done. The house was one of those open concept layouts where the kitchen flows into the living room. I could see the front door and most of the downstairs from where I was sitting. The TV was off. I had the radio on low, some pop station, just for background noise so the silence wouldn't feel so heavy. I'd been working for maybe an hour when the phone rang. This was back when people still had landlines, and hers was one of those cordless phones mounted on the kitchen wall. I remember jumping a little, because the ring was loud and sudden in the quiet house. I answered it the way my mom taught me to answer phones that weren't mine. "Hello?" There was a pause. Then a man's voice. "Who are you?" Not hello, not can I speak to so-and-so, just who are you, in this flat, emotionless tone. "I'm the babysitter," I said. My voice came out smaller than I meant it to. "Where's Sarah?" He used her first name. Not where's the mom or where's the homeowner. He knew her. "She's out," I said. I didn't know if I should be giving him information, but it felt rude not to answer. "Out where?" he asked. "Who are you?" "What's your name? How old are you?" The questions came fast, one after another, and something about the way he asked them made my stomach feel weird. Not curious questions, aggressive questions. "I really can't, I'm just the babysitter," I stammered. "I have to go," I hung up. My hands were shaking. I stood there staring at the phone for a second, then grabbed the paper with the mom's cell number on it and dialed. It rang 4 times before she answered. Music and conversation loud in the background. "Hello? Hi, it's me. The babysitter." Someone just called and was asking a bunch of questions and I didn't know what to tell them, and I got scared so I hung up. She cut me off. "What kind of questions?" "Was it a man?" "Yeah, he wanted to know where you were and who I was and—" "I'll call you right back," she said, and the line went dead. I stood there holding the phone, my math homework forgotten. The house felt different now. The quiet felt watchful instead of empty. The phone rang again. I almost didn't answer it, but what if it was her calling back? I picked up. "Hello?" I shouldn't have hung up on me. The same man's voice, calm, too calm, my throat closed up. I didn't say anything. 1247 Oakwood Drive, he said. "That's where you are right now." "Isn't it?" I felt my whole body go cold. That was the address. I was staring at it written on the paper in front of me. "Is the baby okay?" he asked. Yes," I whispered. "How can you be so sure?" His voice was still calm, almost amused. "When he's that close to a window?" That's when I lost it. I completely lost it. Everything just came pouring out of me in this panicked rush. I'm just the babysitter, and I'm trying really hard on my math homework, and now I'm scared, and I'm also failing math. I know it sounds ridiculous. I know it doesn't make sense that I brought up math homework in the middle of the most terrifying moment of my 12-year-old life. But I think my brain just broke. Every anxious thing I was feeling, about the phone call, about being alone, about school, about being responsible for this baby, just erupted out of me all at once. There was silence on the other end. Then he hung up. I slammed the phone down and ran upstairs. The baby's room was at the end of the hall, door half open. I pushed it all the way open and saw him there in his crib, still sleeping, completely peaceful. The window next to the crib had blinds, but they were cheap plastic ones and you could see through the slats if you were outside looking in. I stared at that window for a long time, searching the darkness outside for movement, for a face, for any sign that someone was out there. I couldn't see anything, just the reflection of the nightlight in the glass. I went back downstairs, turned on every single light in the house, and sat at the kitchen table with my back to the wall, so I could see both the front door and the back sliding glass door at the same time. I didn't touch my homework. I just sat there watching, waiting. 5 minutes later, maybe less, I saw headlights in the driveway. The front door flew open and she rushed in, still in her dress and heels, her date trailing behind her, looking confused and worried. "Are you okay? Is Mason okay?" she asked, grabbing my shoulders. "He's fine, he's sleeping. I checked on him." "Did he call back?" "Yes, he said the address. He said something about the baby being close to a window." Her face changed. Went from worried to something harder. Angry and scared at the same time. "That's my ex-husband," she said, more to herself than to me. "He found us." She went upstairs to check on the baby, came back down, then pulled a wad of cash out of her purse and pressed it into my hands. It was way more than we'd agreed on. Had to be at least $60 or $70. "I'm so sorry," she said. "You should go home now. Thank you for calling me. Thank you for being smart." Her date drove me the 2 blocks to my house, even though I could have walked. I don't think I said a word the whole time. My mom was still awake and asked how it went, and I just said fine because I didn't know how to explain what had happened. The next week, moving trucks showed up at the woman's house. She was gone within days. Just packed up and left in the middle of the night, according to my mom's friend who lived across the street. I never babysat again after that. Not once. Even now, almost 20 years later, when I'm in a quiet house alone at night and the phone rings, my stomach still drops, and I never did finish that math worksheet. Still failed that class too, but at least I came home that night. At least the baby was okay. At least she got away again. Even if I don't know if it stuck that time or if he found her again later, I still wonder sometimes if he was in the bushes outside that window looking in, or if he was calling from Massachusetts, somehow knowing exactly where she'd moved, what the house looked like, where the baby's room was. I don't know which possibility is worse. It was January in Minnesota. My parents had gone out to this bar they liked downtown, maybe 20 minutes away, date night or whatever. My older brother was supposed to be home, but he'd gotten permission to go to his friend's house for a few hours, with the understanding he'd be back by 10. That left me alone in the house. A 16-year-old with the place to myself, which normally would have been great, but our house always felt too big and too quiet when nobody else was home. I was camped out in the living room, sprawled on the couch with a blanket, half watching some show I didn't really care about. The kind of mindless television you put on just for background noise. The house was warm, almost too warm the way my dad always cranked the heat in winter, and I was in that comfortable zone where you're not quite awake, but not really paying attention either. Then I heard it. A small knock. Not from the front door or the back door, but from somewhere below me. From the basement. I muted the TV and sat up listening. Our house is old, built in the 70s, and it makes noises. Pipes creaking, the furnace kicking on, wood settling. You get used to it. But this was different. This was rhythmic. 3 soft knocks, like someone tapping on wood. I waited, thinking maybe I'd imagined it. Nothing. Just silence and the muffled hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. I unmuted the TV and tried to focus on the show, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. Our basement wasn't finished. Just concrete floors, exposed beams, storage boxes, and my dad's workbench area. Nobody had any reason to be down there, especially not at night. The knocking came again. Louder this time, more insistent. I stood up, my heart beating a little faster than normal, and walked to the basement door off the kitchen. I opened it and flipped on the light switch. The stairway flooded with harsh fluorescent light, but everything looked normal from the top of the stairs. "Hello?" My voice came out smaller than I intended, swallowed up by the empty space below. Nothing. I went down slowly, gripping the wooden handrail. The stairs creaked under my weight, announcing every step. When I reached the bottom, I looked around. My dad's workbench was covered in his usual mess of tools and half-finished projects. The storage shelves along the wall were stacked with plastic bins and cardboard boxes. The old couch we'd relegated down there sat in the corner, covered in a sheet. Everything looked exactly as it always did. I walked the perimeter of the basement, checking behind the furnace, looking into the little storage room where we kept holiday decorations. Nothing was out of place. No source for the knocking. Maybe it had been the pipes after all, or something in the walls. I went back upstairs, shut the basement door behind me, and returned to the couch. My show was on a commercial break. I turned the volume up a little higher than before, partly to hear it better, and partly to drown out any other weird noises the house might decide to make. 5 minutes later, maybe less, there was a crash from the basement. A loud, unmistakable crash, like something heavy had fallen or been knocked over. Then the distinct sound of a door opening, the squeak of hinges that needed oil. My entire body went cold. I stood up from the couch, my hands shaking, my mind racing through possibilities. Had something fallen off a shelf? Had the furnace malfunctioned? But doors don't open themselves. Doors need hands. I pulled my phone from my pocket, ready to call my parents or 911 or somebody, but first I needed to know what was happening. I needed to see. I walked to the basement door again, opened it, and looked down. The light was still on from before. Everything looked the same from the top of the stairs. "Hello?" I called down. "Jake?" My brother's name. Maybe he'd come home without me hearing, gone straight down to the basement for some reason. It didn't make sense, but I was grasping for logical explanations. Nothing. "Jake!" I called again, louder this time, my voice cracking a little. Silence. I started down the stairs, each step feeling like it took forever. My hand was slick with sweat on the handrail. About halfway down, I stopped and listened. No movement. No breathing. No indication anyone was down there. When I reached the bottom and turned to look at the main area, my breath caught in my throat. The scene had changed. My dad's workbench had drawers pulled open, tools scattered. The storage shelves looked like someone had been rifling through them. Boxes tipped over, their contents spilling out onto the concrete floor. Plastic bins had been knocked off the shelves entirely. Lids popped off. Old clothes and Christmas decorations scattered everywhere. And then I saw it. The back door, the glass sliding door that led from our basement to the backyard, was wide open. Fully open, letting in a stream of freezing air that I could feel from where I stood. Snow had blown in onto the concrete, forming a small drift just inside the threshold. And there, pressed into that snow, leading out into the darkness of the backyard, were footprints. Fresh footprints. Boot prints, larger than mine, heading away from the house. I don't remember running up the stairs, but suddenly I was at the top, slamming the basement door shut and locking it even though I knew the person was already gone. My hands were shaking so hard I could barely hold my phone as I called my mom. "Mom, someone was in the house. Someone was in the basement. The back door is open and there are footprints." She cut me off, told me to get out of the house right now, go to the neighbors, stay on the phone with her. But I couldn't move. I just stood there in the kitchen, staring at the basement door, imagining someone on the other side. My parents came home in record time. My dad said later they'd done 80 on residential streets. My mum called the police, while my dad grabbed a flashlight and went outside, following the footprints in the snow. I watched from the kitchen window, My mom standing next to me with one hand on my shoulder. The footprints cut across our backyard, over the snow-covered lawn, straight to our wooden privacy fence. Whoever it was had climbed over. You could see where they'd disturbed the snow on top of the fence, where they'd dropped down on the other side. My dad climbed over too, following the trail. The prints continued through the empty lot behind our house, and then to the road where they just stopped. Like the person had vanished. My dad said it looked like a car had been idling there. There were tire tracks in the slush, but no clear tread marks, nothing identifiable. By the time the police arrived, there wasn't much they could do. They took a report, asked if anything was missing. We checked. TV, laptops, my mom's jewelry, everything was still there. Whoever had been in our basement hadn't made it upstairs. They'd been downstairs searching for something, maybe valuables in storage when something spooked them and they ran. Or maybe I'd spooked them. Maybe when I came down the first time and called out, they'd hidden, waited for me to leave. Then tried to keep searching, made too much noise, and bolted when they realized I was coming back down. The police said it was probably opportunistic. Someone saw my parents leave, saw my brother leave, knew only one teenager was home. Or maybe they'd been watching the house for days, knew our patterns. We'd never know. They dusted for prints but never found a match. Never figured out who it was. The case just sort of disappeared into the pile of unsolved break-ins that happen every winter in Minnesota when desperate people do desperate things. We got better locks for that basement door. My dad installed a deadbolt and a security bar. We started leaving more lights on at night, made the house look occupied even when it wasn't. But I still think about it sometimes. About those 5 minutes between the first knock and the crash. About whoever was down there in our basement, going through our things, while I was sitting upstairs on the couch watching TV. About what would have happened if I'd gone down during those 5 minutes instead of after. If I'd walked in on them while they were still there. About whether they were just looking for things to steal, or if they were looking for something else. I never stayed home alone after that. Not until I moved out for college, and even now, years later, when I'm by myself and I hear a noise from another room, that same cold feeling washes over me. The feeling of knowing that someone was in your house, uninvited and unseen, and you had no idea until it was almost too late. I was in 5th grade the first time I was allowed to walk home from school by myself. 10 years old, maybe 9, I don't remember exactly. What I do remember is how proud I felt, how grown up. No more daycare, no more waiting around for my mom to pick me up. Just me, my backpack, and the 15-minute walk through our neighborhood. This was literally the second day of my new routine. Day 2 of independence. Our house was in a quiet subdivision, the kind where everyone knew everyone and kids rode bikes in the cul-de-sacs until the streetlights came on. White house, brick pillars on the front porch that my mom had painted this weird shade of green years ago, red front doors that my dad insisted made the place look distinguished. We had a white dog, some mutt my sister had named Snowball, despite him being more cream-colored than white, who spent most of his time in the fenced backyard barking at squirrels. I got home around 3:30, let myself in with the key I wore on a lanyard around my neck, and immediately felt that rush of being home alone. I could watch whatever I wanted on TV. I could have as many snacks as I felt like. For 2 hours until my mom got home from work, I was basically unsupervised. I dropped my backpack by the couch, grabbed some crackers from the kitchen, and was flipping through channels when the phone rang. Our landline. This was back when everyone still had them before cell phones took over. Ours was mounted on the kitchen wall with a long coiled cord that always got tangled. I picked it up. "Hello? Is David there?" A man's voice, flat, impatient. "Sorry, wrong number," I said automatically. Here's the thing, we got wrong numbers constantly, like multiple times a week. Our phone number was 1 digit off from the H&R Block in town. You know, the tax preparation place. And especially during tax season, We'd get call after call from people trying to reach them. I'd developed this whole routine for it. They'd realize their mistake, apologize, I'd say it was okay. Everyone would hang up, simple, polite, over in 10 seconds. So I was waiting for him to say, "Oh, I'm sorry," like they always did. Instead, his voice got louder, angrier. "Don't give me that. I need to talk to David. I know he's there. Put him on." My stomach did this little flip. I have 2 Uncle Davids, but neither of them live here. This is a wrong... Stop lying to me. He was yelling now, really yelling. "I know David's there. You tell that piece of shit to get on the phone right now, or I swear to God..." He launched into this rant, cursing and screaming, his words tumbling over each other so fast I could barely understand him. He sounded frantic, unhinged. At 10 years old, I'd never really encountered someone who was genuinely crazy. Sure, I'd seen angry adults before, teachers who yelled, parents at soccer games, but this was different. This felt dangerous. I should have hung up. Looking back, I don't know why I didn't. Maybe I was too scared to move. Maybe some part of my kid brain thought hanging up would be rude, that I'd get in trouble somehow. I just stood there in the kitchen, the phone pressed to my ear, my hand shaking. Then he started describing my house. "I know where you are," he said, his voice suddenly lower, more controlled, which was somehow worse than the yelling. "White house, green porch with those brick pillars, red doors. And you got that white dog in the backyard, don't you?" Yeah, I see it." Every word felt like ice water in my veins. He was describing my house. Perfectly. Details someone driving by might notice, but also details someone standing outside might see. The dog, Snowball, was probably visible from the street if you looked into the backyard through the gaps in the fence. "I know you're lying," he said, his voice almost casual now, like he was commenting on the weather. "And I'm gonna come get your ass." The line went dead. For maybe 3 seconds I just stood there frozen, the dial tone buzzing in my ear. Then my brain kicked into gear and panic took over. I slammed the phone back on the hook and ran to the kitchen, yanking open the drawer where we kept the knives. My hands were shaking so bad I almost dropped it, but I grabbed one of the big ones, the kind my mom used to cut raw chicken. Then I grabbed the cordless phone from the living room and dialed my mom's work number. My fingers fumbling over the buttons. She answered on the second ring. "Hello? Mom?" My voice came out high and weird. "Mom, someone called and he knows where we live and he said he's coming and..." "Slow down, honey." "What? Who called?" I was speed-walking to the front window, pulling back the curtain just enough to peek outside. "Some guy looking for Uncle David, and he described our house, and he said he's coming..." The street looked empty, normal. Mrs. Patterson across the way was getting her mail. No strange cars. No one lurking by our driveway. My mom was asking more questions, but I wasn't really listening because that's when I heard it. Bang, bang, bang. Someone was at the front door. Not knocking, kicking. Slamming their fist or their foot against it, hard enough that I could hear it echo through the house. I screamed. I didn't mean to. It just came out of me. This high-pitched shriek that hurt my own ears. The knife was still in one hand, the phone in the other. And I could hear my mom's voice shouting my name through the speaker. But all I could think was that he was here. He was really here. He was going to break down the door, and I ran. Down the hallway to the bathroom, the only room in the house besides my parents' bedroom with a lock on the door. I slammed it shut, twisted the lock, and then just collapsed on the floor with my back against the door. The knife in my lap, my mom's voice still coming from the phone. "I'm in the bathroom," I managed to say. "Someone's at the door. They're trying to get in. I'm leaving right now," she said. "Right now. I'm calling the police and I'm coming home." "Stay there. Don't open the door for anyone. Not anyone. You hear me?" The kicking continued for what felt like forever, but was probably only a minute or two. Then it stopped. The house went silent except for my ragged breathing, and my mom's voice telling me over and over that she was on her way, that the police were coming, that I was going to be okay. I don't know how long I sat there. Long enough for my legs to go numb. Long enough to stare at every shadow under the door gap, and convince myself someone was on the other side. Then I heard the garage door opening. The most beautiful sound I'd ever heard in my life. "Sweetie, where are you?" My mom's voice. I unlocked the bathroom door and ran out, still holding that stupid knife, and crashed into her in the hallway. I started sobbing, like really sobbing, the kind where you can't breathe right. She was holding me, asking if I was okay, checking me for injuries, and I just kept saying, "He was here, he was really here." The police came about 10 minutes later. They checked around the house, found some scuff marks on the front door, but no signs of forced entry. No one had stuck around. Whoever it was had either gotten scared off or realized they had the wrong house after all. My mum stayed home from work the rest of the day. She called my Uncle David, her brother, and I heard her yelling at him in her bedroom while I sat on the couch wrapped in a blanket, staring at nothing. I didn't get the full story until I was older, maybe 16 or 17, when it felt safe to ask about it. Turns out my Uncle David had been a pretty serious drug addict for years, meth mostly. That's why we hardly ever saw him, why he wasn't at family gatherings, why my mum's face would get tight whenever his name came up. Apparently he'd given some dealer or someone he owed money to a fake address and phone number to get them off his back. And because he was high or stupid or both, he'd used ours. Just changed one digit, close enough to be believable, far enough to not actually lead to him. The guy on the phone had probably been driving around looking at houses that matched the description, found ours and figured it was close enough. Or maybe he was so messed up on meth himself that he just convinced himself this had to be it. Either way, I was the one who answered. I was the one who paid the price for my uncle's cowardice. Thanks, Uncle David. I never stayed home alone after that. Not for years. Even now, as an adult with my own place, if someone knocks on my door unexpectedly, my heart rate spikes. I check the peephole 3 times. I keep my phone in my hand, and I never ever answer wrong numbers. This happened 2 years ago, right before Christmas break. I was in my 2nd year at university, and I just finished my last lecture before the holidays. Some tedious economics class that had dragged on forever. Everyone was buzzing about their plans, comparing travel schedules and family dinners. My family had decided to go up to Scotland for the weekend to visit my grandparents. They'd invited me along, obviously, but I'd declined. I had this big gaming tournament online that weekend, and honestly, the thought of having the house to myself sounded perfect. So there I was, pulling into the driveway around 4 in the afternoon, the December sky already starting to darken. The house looked different when it was empty, bigger somehow, more imposing. All the windows were dark, and our neighbor's Christmas lights next door made our place look even more lifeless in comparison. I let myself in through the front door, dumped my backpack in the hallway, and immediately headed upstairs for a shower. I'd been in lectures since 9 that morning and felt disgusting. The hot water felt amazing, and I probably stayed in there longer than I should have, just enjoying the silence and the steam. After I got out and threw on some sweats and a hoodie, I headed down to the kitchen. My mum had left me some leftovers in the fridge with a note, shepherd's pie, and instructions to please eat actual food, and not just crisps. I smiled at that, heated up a portion, and ate standing at the counter while scrolling through my phone. By 6 o'clock, I was settled in the living room with my PlayStation. I'd been looking forward to this all week. Just me, my games, no one telling me to turn it down or take a break. I grabbed my headset from the TV stand, plugged it in, adjusted the mic, and loaded up the game. Within minutes, I was completely absorbed, talking to my mates through the headset, coordinating strategies, the whole world narrowing down to just the screen in front of me. That's the thing about gaming with a headset. You're in your own bubble. The noise cancellation was decent, and when you're focused on the game, properly focused, everything else just fades away. I couldn't hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen, couldn't hear the wind outside, Couldn't hear anything except my teammates' voices and the game audio. I'd been playing for maybe an hour, maybe a bit more, when something made me pause. Not a sound exactly, but a feeling. You know that sensation when you think you've heard something, but you're not quite sure. Like your brain registered it, but you were too distracted to process it in real time. I muted my mic and pulled one side of the headset off my ear. That's when I heard it clearly. Thud, thud, thud. Heavy footsteps from upstairs. Directly above me, my entire body went cold. The kind of cold that starts in your stomach and radiates outward until even your fingertips feel numb. For a few seconds, I just sat there frozen on the sofa, controller in my hands, trying to rationalize what I was hearing. Maybe it was the house settling. Old houses make noise, right? Maybe something had fallen over. Maybe the wind had knocked something. Thud, thud, thud. No, that was footsteps. Someone was walking around upstairs. In my house. While I was supposed to be alone, my mates were still talking through the headset, asking where I'd gone, why I wasn't moving in the game. I could hear their tinny voices, but couldn't process what they were saying. My brain was racing through possibilities. Had someone broken in? Was someone still up there? Had they been there the whole time I'd been gaming, just waiting? I thought about going upstairs to check. That's what people do in films, isn't it? They grab a cricket bat or something and go investigate. But I'm not an idiot, and I'm definitely not brave. If someone was up there, what was I going to do? Confront them? Get myself hurt? I made a decision in about 2 seconds. I yanked my headset off completely, dropped it on the sofa, and moved. Fast. The living room has 2 doors, one that leads to the hallway and the main stairs, and another that goes to the dining room and the back of the house. I ran to the hallway door first, pushed it closed as quietly as I could, and turned the old brass lock. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly couldn't get it to turn. Then I ran to the other door and locked that one too. I was trapped in the living room, but at least whoever was upstairs couldn't get to me without me hearing them try to break through a locked door. My phone was on the coffee table where I'd left it. I grabbed it, my hands trembling so hard I nearly dropped it, and dialed 999, emergency services. Which service do you need? Police, I managed to say. My voice sounded strange, higher than normal. Someone's in my house. I'm alone and someone's upstairs. The operator was calm, professional, asking me questions. Where was I? Was I safe? Could I get out of the house? I told her I'd locked myself in the living room, that I could hear someone moving around upstairs, that my family was away and I was supposed to be alone. She told me police were on their way, told me to stay on the line, to stay quiet, to stay where I was. I sat on the floor behind the sofa, phone pressed to my ear, and listened. The footsteps had stopped. Maybe whoever it was had heard me running around locking doors. Maybe they knew I'd figured out they were there. The silence was somehow worse than the noise had been. It felt like forever before I heard the sirens. In reality, it was probably less than 10 minutes. But when you're sitting in a locked room waiting to find out if someone's about to try to break in, every second stretches out. I heard car doors slamming outside, voices, heavy knocking on the front door. Police. Is anyone home? I unlocked the living room door and nearly fell over myself, getting to the front door to let them in. There were 3 officers, 2 men and a woman. I must have looked terrified because the woman immediately asked if I was hurt. No, but someone's upstairs. I heard them walking around. They told me to wait by the front door, to stay there, and then they went up. I could hear their heavy boots on the stairs, hear them calling out, "Police!" As they searched, I stood in the doorway, shivering despite my hoodie, watching the staircase and waiting. It took them about 20 minutes to search the whole house. When they came back down, the older officer, grey hair, serious face, looked grim. "Someone's definitely been in your house, son. Your bedroom window's been forced open. Frames damaged. They came in through there, my bedroom. The window that faces the back garden, that's partially hidden by the oak tree. Someone had climbed up or used a ladder or something and broken in. They took me upstairs to show me. My bedroom window was wide open, the lock mechanism bent and broken. Cold air was pouring in. My desk drawers were pulled open, my wardrobe door ajar. But nothing seemed to be missing. My laptop was still on my desk. The cash I kept in my drawer was still there. You probably scared them off, the female officer said. When you started moving around, locking doors, calling us, they must have heard and bolted back out the window. They checked the back garden with torches, found scuff marks on the fence where someone had climbed over. But whoever it was long gone. After the police left, I called my parents. I probably should have called them earlier, but I'd been in shock. My dad answered, all cheerful, asking how my day had been. When I told him what happened, there was this long pause. "We're coming home," he said. "No, Dad, you don't have to. We're coming home tonight. I'll call your uncle to come stay with you until we get there." My uncle showed up within the hour. My parents didn't get back until nearly 2 in the morning, having driven through the night from Scotland. And then I got the lecture. 2 solid hours of it, even though it was almost 4 in the morning by the time they finished. Lock all windows and doors when you're home alone. Check them before it gets dark. Don't wear noise-canceling headsets. Keep your phone on you. Install the alarm system app. Call them if anything feels wrong. The list went on and on. I wasn't even annoyed. Mostly I was just relieved they were home. We got the window fixed the next day and installed better locks on all of them. My dad also set up cameras around the outside of the house. I still game, obviously, but I never use my headset when I'm home alone anymore. And I check every window, every door, every lock before I sit down. Because now I know what it's like to realize you're not alone when you thought you were, and I never want to feel that way again.